You've definitely heard about the Sparx skate sharpener, promising professional level sharpening at home in an easy to use package. Throw in portability, the ability to easily change out hollows, and it sounds almost too good to be true. But is it? In this part one of a two-part series, I tell you everything I've learned from owning a Sparx, the good, the bad, and the frustrating. Episode, I talk about the good, the bad, and everything I've learned over the course of owning a Sparx since they launched on Kickstarter. So to kind of give a quick explainer for those of you who don't know what a Sparx is, or maybe you do and you don't know all the bits and pieces of it, I'm going to start there. What is a Sparx skate sharpener? A Sparx is a self-contained portable skate sharpener. It's a sharpener, not a re-edger. A lot of people get those confused. Re-edgers are those small handheld tools that you keep in your bag to just kind of do a little touch-up on your skates between sharpenings. And what those do is they don't really sharpen anything. They just kind of fold the metal on your blades back into shape. They're not meant to really cut any metal like a sharpener does. So they're really just for a little touch-up, or if you realize, hey, my skates feel really bad and I can't run out before a game and get them sharpened, you can use one of those re-edger tools. The Sparx is an actual full-on sharpener. It cuts steel. It grinds it down and cuts steel. There have been 3 different generations of the Sparx sharpeners since they came out in 2015, 2016 via Kickstarter. Like I said, that's where I got mine, directly from the Kickstarter. So I have kind of the oldest you can get, the Gen 1. In that time, they've also done pro and consumer models. They're not that different. They work exactly the same way, use the exact same hardware and the same accessories and everything. But the big differences are the pro models have a larger, sturdier base because they're meant to just kind of sit in a pro shop or, a hockey store or something like that and not really move anywhere. They're not going any places. And also the pro models have a way to attach vacuum to the base. That way you can get out all the little metal shavings a lot easier. Whereas the consumer models just have a filter in there because it's a consumer model. They don't expect you to sharpen nearly as many skates as the pro models do. Now all the Sparx sharpeners, all generations, use the same proprietary ring system for sharpening. And the way those work is they're little rings that every ring is a different hollow. And so when you want to change out hollows, you just change out rings and it sharpens to a different hollow. They also have their own fire sharpening, which is the Sparx version of a flat bottom profile. So it's very similar to like the flat bottom V profile. It's just their version of it. So that gives you kind of the overview of what actually is a Sparx sharpener. So how do I use my Sparx? Like I said, I've had it since the Kickstarter, so I've had it for about 8 years now. It's just a consumer model, not a pro model or anything. So it's just one you could go buy in a store or anybody can buy online. With it, I've sharpened, obviously, my own skates. I think I was adding up about 17 other people's skates that I've sharpened. There may be a couple more in there, but I think it's like 17 people. And whenever I sharpen people's skates, especially if I'm sharpening them for the first couple times, I always ask for feedback. Make sure that what they think of them. Never had anybody say that they've gotten a bad sharpen or they don't feel right or something. Honestly, the only negative feedback I've gotten is I did have a couple people say that they felt too sharp. And I don't know if that's because of the hollow that I put on them. Maybe it was different what they were getting, because a lot of beer leaguers, when they go get their skate sharpened, they don't say what hollow they want. They just say whatever the store does, which is usually like a half or a 5/8. Kind of depends where you're going. So I might have done a different one for them because they didn't know. That's my assumption, but I consider too sharp to not really be an issue. Now with Sparx, one of the things that you can adjust and you should adjust is how many passes the sharpening wheel makes on a blade. And generally they recommend something between 4 and 6 passes for a regular sharpening. It's 10 possibly if you're doing a brand new hollow on some steel, or you have completely unsharpened steel, fresh out of the package. Now, myself, when I sharpen my own skates, I sharpen them every 2 to 3 games. So for me, that's every 2-ish hours of skating approximately. And I usually do 2 passes on there, and that seems to be great. For most other people, when I do their skates, unless I see any issues with stuff, I usually go with 4, and that seems to work out just fine. I also, when I'm sharpening blades, I never try to fix issues. If people have like big nicks or gouges in their blades, I tell them you got to take them to a person. I know that technically if you have a nick, I could sharpen the blade down past that nick, or if there's a gouge or something like that in it, and take care of it. But one, I don't want to, use up a ton of the sharpening wheel for who knows how many passes that's going to take if it's not right on the edge. And also, I don't know that necessarily take care of it. I think it would. In my head, that makes sense, but I don't know. So I do tell people, if you have something like that, I'm not going to sharpen them. Take them to a person. I also, in all the sharpenings I've done for myself, for other people, we've never noticed any kind of change to profiles. That is something I know people mention with their Sparx, is that they're worried that using a Sparx machine is going to change your profile. But it really shouldn't do that, because the way it works, it's all off of spring tension. That's what holds the wheel against the blade as it's sharpening. And as long as you set it right, set the height right, that you're not, really jamming into that steel, it should not change it at all. It should actually change the profile less than a manual sharpening, where you're counting on someone applying extremely even pressure as they go past the wheel. Every time before I sharpen a new set of steel on the Sparx, and by new I mean change somebody else's steel or doing mine after doing someone else's, I always check for the wheel height and adjust it as needed. A lot of times it doesn't need adjusting, but I always check. It takes a couple minutes. I also listen as I sharpen skates. At least on the first couple passes, I always make sure I listen. You can definitely hear a sound change if there's something wrong with the blade, even if it's minor. You can usually tell if somebody stepped on concrete or has a small nick in there or something like that. And if I hear a new noise while it's sharpening and it's not corrected in a pass or two, to me that's a stop. Take a look, make sure everything's working correctly on the machine, everything's set up right. And if it is and it's still making that noise, to me that's a red flag of, hey, have somebody else look at these things, not run it on the Sparx like that. I do also use a non-Sparx edge checker on anybody's blades but my own every single time I sharpen them. I do check mine pretty regularly, just not every time, but anybody else's skates that I do, I make sure to check it. It's pretty much always stays level. I have had adjusted a couple times over the years, but by a couple times, I mean 3 or 4 times over the years, and it's never that out of level. I also don't move my Sparx around. It stays in one spot. I'm sure if I start traveling with it, I would like to take it to places, then I will do a adjustment check and, still be checking for level every time I sharpen, because I'm sure jostling around, that's going to get a little bit out of a line. In that time, have found a few fiddly bits while working with the Sparx. It is a little fidgety to adjust the alignment on a Gen 1 machine. It involves using a special grinding wheel that's not really a grinding wheel, but it's a wheel and it's got a line all the way around it, and a magnifying glass device that sits where you clamp in the blade. You hit a button on the machine, it pulls that wheel in right next to the magnifying device, and then there is a plastic knob on the carriage that holds the sharpening wheel that you have to adjust kind of back and forth. You have to look directly over the machine, not at an angle, but directly down on it, and kind of visually line up like a little V notch, and then a line. So not the easiest thing. I mean, it's not difficult to do, but it is very fiddly to check that. And I know people have put out what their guesstimates are of if you do use an edge checker, how out of a line your edges are with how many clicks one way or another you should have to adjust that wheel. It's a rough guideline. I've tried that. It is not perfect, but it kind of gives you sort of an idea. So not great. But like I said, I don't have to adjust it very often. And that, to me, that's the fiddliest bit of dealing with the Gen 1. Now, the Gen 2 and Gen 3 machines, they have an adjustment tool instead of having that thumb screw that, to me, looks like a screwdriver that you use for changing your alignment. And I think Sparx has heard that this is a fiddly bit and kind of a pain for people. So that's why they came out with their new beam edge checker. And what that does is it drops on top of a blade, much the way these old school kind of edge checkers would. And it uses a laser beam to check for level, and then works with an app on your phone to tell you how many turns you have to turn your carriage and stuff back and forth with your adjustment tool to get it level. It tells you that. So you're not doing what I'm doing in my Gen 1 machine, which is visually checking, and then really I have to run a blade through there and then check it. So it's kind of saving all that and doing it with the smarts of the app. Haven't used it. Haven't used a Gen 2 or Gen 3 machine. Haven't used the beam edge checker. Seems like a cool idea, though. And if it gets rid of that manual process, that's awesome. I will also say, along with that, just to throw out there for things that are on the newer machines that I have nothing to do with and I don't have any experience with, is, like I said, they have an app that works with that beam edge checker. That app also handles QR codes. They have QR code stickers they can put on skates. So that way you can keep track of who gets kind of what sharpening and stuff, which handy if you're sharpening a lot of people's skates, I guess. If you're kind of, sharpening your whole team skates, or you and your kids buddies or something like that skates, handy. I use a spreadsheet to handle all this stuff and look at it. And also pretty much everybody I know uses the generic hollows. So it's not that big of a deal. Now, changing the rings, super easy. So if you have to change hollows, it's really easy. They're, again, just a thumb screw that you pop on and off. Never have an issue with it. They're just really easy to do. The only thing I've ever run into, and this isn't even an issue, I don't think, is if you sharpen a lot of skates, like back to back to back to back to back, then one, the ring gets super hot. So if you have to change it, it's super hot. You don't want to touch it. And two, it can stick to the carriage. So that's been the only thing I've seen, but you have to sharpen a lot of skates in a row to have that be a thing. Or I guess if you did a ton of passes on a couple skates. So like I was saying earlier, how I don't like to try and fix and correct issues like huge nicks or gouges in steel. If you were trying to correct stuff like that and you had to do, 15, 20 passes, it probably would get super hot like that too and stick. Again, not a big deal. Wait a couple minutes, cools down, pops right off. But that's as fiddly as that gets. It's super easy. I mean, generally changing one of the wheels for me probably doesn't even take 30 seconds to do. It's a super, super quick process. Now, I see a lot of hate for Sparx machines online a lot of times, and I totally get it. I agree with people that it does not replace a good manual sharpening. I say good manual sharpening. It doesn't replace any manual sharpening, but good manual sharpenings. A trained equipment guy does a whole lot more than just sharpen a skate. They check the steel, check the skate, check rivets, give advice on hollows, tell you if certain things are breaking down. Hey, your tendon guard is starting to crack. You're going to need a new tongue, anything like that. They're going to do a whole bunch of other stuff besides just give you a good sharpening. Obviously, Sparx isn't doing that. It's not checking any of those things. And if you're only going to somebody that has a Sparx and they're not looking at your skate for anything, you're losing out on all of that knowledge, all of that info that you could be getting. So that is something you definitely lose having a Sparx versus going to a good equipment person that knows how to do a good sharpening. So, like I said previously, I'm not comfortable using the Sparx to correct any big issues with steel either. Anyone can get a Sparx, and you have a lot of people that are using them and not paying attention to how they use them. They don't do height checks. They don't check edge level. They don't listen to how the stuff gets sharpened. Nothing. They just drop in a skate, hit the big go button, walk away. The problem with that is a lot of stores are starting to use Sparx only for sharpenings. Like they don't have a way to do manual sharpenings. We just had a hockey store open up near me. It's great. We have a hockey store here now. They only have Sparx machines. They don't have anything else to sharpen skates with. And I've seen a lot of stores get away from having these machines because it takes time and expertise to learn how to use like a stand-up, like a Wasota machine to do that at all. Like you have to have somebody that knows what they're doing. And I've been turned away from like a Play It Again Sports to get my skate sharpened there back in the day because they're like, oh, the one guy that knows how to use the sharpener, he's not here today. You know, that it alleviates from a store point, alleviates that problem completely because everybody should know how to drop a skate in and hit the play button. But unfortunately, that's all they teach people to do. So that's what a lot of people do. So then you get a lot of people see the Sparx being used and there's no care for anything. There's no couple minute looking stuff over before they sharpen and a couple minutes checking stuff afterwards. And then you get a crap sharpening. I mean, it's really easy to do that, but it has nothing to do with the Sparx. And then people blame it on the Sparx. It has nothing to do with that. You know, you have people that wouldn't have been allowed to do skate sharpenings, you know, a year ago or whatever before they got Sparx. And now they have a Sparx and they go, yeah, sure, anybody can do it. You know, day one, you can drop a skate on there and do it. Who cares? I think that's the biggest issue people have is a lot of these stores, especially, and I don't know about regular consumers having Sparx machines because I haven't talked to anybody else that has one, but a lot of these stores, they don't get any training on a Sparx. You know, if you're doing the regular stand-up machine, you have a whole bunch of training and you trial and error a bunch of times. And, you know, you're going through a bunch of iterations to make sure you know how to sharpen skates before you sharpen a customer's skates. Whereas now, I think they show you once. You know, it's probably the first skate that comes in for the day they show you. And, yeah, there's nothing to it. You know, so you get a crap sharpening out of it. Because it is totally possible to get a crap sharpening out of a Sparx. So I think that's where a lot of this hate comes from. Not from the Sparx, but from what it has, how lazy it has allowed places to get because they have them now. Thanks for checking out part 1 of this super detailed Sparx review. Please come on back for part 2. And as always, any likes, reviews, and especially subscriptions are appreciated. See y'all in the next one.